I was 33 the morning my father, Richard, stood up in a crowded Vermont courtroom and tried to block the adoption of my children. He wore a charcoal suit, a picture of old money and unshakable authority, and told the family court judge I was financially ruined and morally unfit. He expected me to shatter under the weight of his public disapproval, to surrender. What he didn't know was that the 9-year-old boy sitting next to me, Leo, was holding a piece of paper that would end my father's life as he knew it. When the judge asked for my response, I didn't raise my voice. I just opened a binder of bank records that would soon cost my parents their country club membership, their luxury estate, and their freedom. This is a story about the quiet kind of justice for anyone who has ever been the disappointment of a family that measures your worth by what you can provide for them. How old were you when you realized your family wasn't a safe place? Drop your age in the comments and make sure to subscribe. Let me back up. 14 months before that courtroom showdown, I was sitting in the sunroom of the Burlington Country Club. It was a Sunday morning in October, rain streaking the floor-to-ceiling windows. Across from me sat my parents, Richard and Brenda, and my younger sister, Caroline. I'm a senior data compliance auditor for a regional healthcare network, spending my days tracking misallocated hospital funds, searching for anomalies in spreadsheets. My parents, however, didn't care about my career. To them, my lack of a husband and biological children was a stain on the family brand. My father set his mimosa on the white linen tablecloth, wiped his mouth with a cloth napkin, and leaned forward. He told me my clock was running out. He said if I didn't settle down and produce a biological heir within 18 months, he would formally remove me as a contingent beneficiary from my late Aunt Beatrice's generational trust. He said I didn't understand what real family meant, that he was done funding a ghost. I looked at my mother. She was adjusting her silk scarf. Her eyes focused on a waiter across the room, refusing to meet my gaze. Caroline sat next to her, feeding a piece of croissant to her toddler, a faint smirk playing on her lips. I excused myself, citing a work emergency. I walked out of the humid, perfume-scented sunroom and stepped into the cold Vermont rain, crossing the asphalt parking lot to my Subaru. The engine was running, and as I opened the driver's side door and got in, the weak car heater smelled of dust and damp wool. I looked up at the rearview mirror. Leo, 9 years old, and Maya, 6, were sitting in the backseat. I had been fostering them in secret for 14 months. My parents didn't know they existed. To Richard and Brenda, children were pedigree markers. Bringing 2 foster kids with fractured pasts into their sterile world was a risk I had delayed as long as possible. The adoption paperwork was sitting in a manila folder in my glove compartment, signed and waiting for a court date. Leo didn't fidget. He possessed the eerie stillness of a child who had spent his entire life decoding the unpredictable moods of adults. He watched the rain hit the glass. Maya was tracing the seam of her seatbelt. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out a red ballpoint pen, the specific pen I used to circle financial discrepancies at the hospital. I pressed the top button. The sharp plastic snap cut through the hum of the engine. I looked at the glowing windows of the country club. My father was paying the brunch check with a crisp $100 bill, laughing with a man at the next table. He thought I was sitting in my car, weeping over his ultimatum. He expected me to walk back inside, lower my head, and agree to his terms. I slipped the red pen back into my pocket. I turned around in my seat and looked at Leo. His dark eyes met mine, steady and cautious. "Time to meet your grandparents," I said. Leo unbuckled his seatbelt. He didn't ask if they would like him. He opened his door and stepped into the rain, bracing for the cold. The heavy oak doors of the Burlington Country Club required 2 hands to push open. I pulled them wide, ushering Leo and Maya out of the freezing rain and into the vaulted lobby. The air inside was thick with the scent of roasted coffee, expensive floral arrangements, and cedarwood polish. It was a curated, climate-controlled environment designed to keep the uncomfortable realities of the world outside. Leo wiped his wet sneakers on the monogrammed entry mat, his cheap windbreaker dripping onto the polished hardwood. Maya clutched her stuffed rabbit, burying her face into its frayed ears. They looked small and out of place, a stark contrast to the cashmere coats and leather handbags checking in at the coat room. I took Maya by the hand and placed my other hand lightly on Leo's shoulder. We walked down the hallway toward the sunroom. The muted sounds of a jazz trio drifted through the archway, mingling with the low hum of privileged conversations and the clinking of silver cutlery against fine china. I navigated us through the maze of white tablecloths. Waiters in pressed waistcoats stepped aside, their eyes darting to the damp children at my side before quickly looking away. I spotted my family at their corner table. Richard was gesturing with his empty champagne flute, telling a story to Caroline. Brenda was examining her manicure, a look of serene boredom resting on her features. Caroline was wiping a crumb from her toddler's chin with a linen napkin. They were a portrait of generational wealth, secure in their bubble of status and expectation. I stopped at the edge of their table. The waiter, who had been approaching to clear their plates, took one look at my face, pivoted on his heel, and disappeared toward the kitchen. Mom, Dad. They looked up, expecting an apology. They expected me to take my seat, fold my hands, and concede to their timeline. Instead, they saw two dripping, shivering children standing by my side. "This is Leo and Maya," I said, keeping my voice level and clear. "My children." The silence that descended upon our table didn't feel empty. It felt dense, heavy, and suffocating. It was the specific, weaponized quiet my family had cultivated for decades, designed to punish anyone who stepped out of line. Brenda stopped breathing. Her gaze snapped away from me and locked onto Caroline. She refused to tilt her chin downward. She would not acknowledge the physical existence of the children, standing less than 3 feet from her expensive leather boots. Caroline's reaction was instinctive. She reached across her chair and pulled her toddler into her lap, wrapping her arms around him as if Leo and Maya were carrying a highly contagious disease. She looked at me with wide, scandalized eyes, her mouth pressed into a tight line of sheer disgust. Richard didn't look at the children either. His focus remained entirely on me. The color drained from his face, leaving his skin a pale, ashen gray. His jaw tightened, the muscles flexing under his collar. He set his champagne flute down with slow, terrifying precision. He placed his palms flat on the white tablecloth and pushed himself up from his chair. He didn't shout. Men like my father never raised their voices in public. They used their tone like a scalpel. "You are not turning this family legacy into your personal charity project," he whispered. The words were sharp, clipped, and meant to draw blood. "Take them back to wherever you found them." He turned his back to me. He didn't give me the satisfaction of a full confrontation. He simply dismissed me, and by extension, my children. I didn't move. I stood there, watching his back, feeling the weight of his rejection settle over Leo and Maya like a shroud. But this wasn't about winning an argument in a country club. This was about setting a trap. I turned to the children, my voice calm. "Let's go, kids." We walked out, the silence of the sunroom following us. The next 14 months were a blur of legal battles and covert investigations. Richard, true to form, leveraged every connection he had to delay the adoption. He hired expensive lawyers, filed frivolous motions, and even anonymously reported me to state welfare, claiming I was an unfit parent. He didn't know I was a forensic auditor. I traced the IP address of the anonymous report directly to the South Burlington Public Library and cross-referenced it with my mother's weekly Botanical Society meeting schedule. The timestamps aligned perfectly. Brenda, in her quiet, insidious way, had tried to use the government to steal my children. I played along with their charade, letting them believe they were winning. I even approached my father at a charity gala, feigning desperation, asking for a loan to cover my legal fees. He swelled with pride, convinced he had me cornered. He offered me a cashier's check for $25,000. Along with a handwritten note stating it was contingent on me withdrawing the adoption petition. He thought he was buying my compliance. He thought he was buying my children. What he didn't know was that I had already secured the real evidence. Years of his financial malfeasance, siphoning hundreds of thousands from Aunt Beatrice's trust fund into phantom accounts, all to fund his lavish lifestyle. The night before the adoption hearing, Caroline texted me. "Dad met with his attorney this afternoon," she wrote. They are drafting a formal objection for the hearing tomorrow. He is going to present your loan request to the judge as proof of your financial ruin. You are going to lose those kids, Aubrey. Save yourself the public humiliation and withdraw the petition. She thought she was delivering a patriarchal threat, wearing down my resolve. She didn't understand she was merely confirming my strategy had worked flawlessly. By handing Richard that fabricated plea for help, I guaranteed his attendance and his arrogance. He was walking into family court with a lawyer armed with a fake letter, eager to expose my manufactured financial instability. He had no idea I was sitting at my dining room table, armed with the forensic proof of his imminent destruction. I set the phone face down. I reached into a shopping bag and pulled out 3 heavy black vinyl 3-ring binders. I purchased them that afternoon at a local office supply store. They smelled of fresh cardboard and factory plastic. I aligned them in a neat row across the table. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out my red ballpoint pen. I pressed the top button. The sharp plastic click cut through the quiet house. It was the sound of an auditor clocking in. I opened the cover of the first volume. This binder was the foundation of the trap. It established the pattern of malicious harassment. I slid a fixed stack of printed emails and digital routing logs into clear protective sleeves. Here lay the documentation of the anonymous state welfare report. Using my crimson ink, I highlighted the specific Internet Protocol address traced directly to the South Burlington Public Library. Next to that network log, I placed a printed schedule of the local Botanical Society. Drawing a sharp circle around my mother's weekly Thursday morning meeting time, the geography and the timestamps aligned with surgical precision. Brenda tried to use the government to steal my children. Tomorrow morning. A judge would look at these paired documents and see the mechanics of a felony. I snapped the metal rings shut and closed the cover. I opened the second volume. This was the financial autopsy. I inserted the encrypted tax document, followed by 40 pages of high-level summary ledgers from Granite State Savings. The numbers printed on these pages represented the pulse of the generational trust. I used my pen to circle every recurring withdrawal of $4,500. I drew a sharp line connecting those withdrawals to the memo designation for Stowe property maintenance. I wrote the final calculation at the bottom of the last page, $320,000. That was the sum total of the fabricated maintenance fees. At the very back of this volume, I inserted a certified copy of the county property deed proving Aunt Beatrice's ski chalet was sold 9 years ago. Richard siphoned hundreds of thousands of dollars into a phantom account to fund his luxurious lifestyle. This specific binder was his one-way ticket to a federal indictment. I secured the pages and closed the second cover. I pulled the third volume toward me. This was the kill shot. I reached into my fireproof safe and retrieved the sealed plastic evidence bag containing the $25,000 cashier's check and Richard's handwritten note. I locked the plastic sleeve into the metal rings. This piece of paper transcended financial fraud. It was a direct attempt to obstruct justice, a bribe offered to influence a court proceeding. It was the final, undeniable proof of their moral bankruptcy. The next morning, in that crowded Vermont courtroom, Richard stood up, confident, arrogant, and utterly unprepared. He presented his lawyer's formal objection, waiving my fabricated loan request as proof of my financial ruin. He painted me as irresponsible, unstable, and unfit to care for children. He ended his speech with a flourish, expecting victory. Then it was my turn. I didn't need to speak much. I simply asked Leo to approach the bench. My 9-year-old, with the quiet dignity of a seasoned veteran, handed the judge the sealed evidence bag containing the cashier's check and my father's handwritten note. The judge's eyes widened as he read it. The court clerk then presented the 3 binders I had prepared. Each one meticulously documented my parents' crimes: Brenda's anonymous welfare report, Richard's embezzlement from Aunt Beatrice's trust, and his blatant attempt to bribe me into abandoning my children. The silence that followed wasn't the weaponized quiet of the country club. It was the stunned silence of absolute defeat. Richard's face, once pale, now seemed to crumble. Brenda looked utterly lost, her carefully constructed facade shattering. Caroline, for once, had no smirk. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. The adoption of Leo and Maya was granted. My parents' objection was dismissed. But the real consequence was far greater. The evidence I presented led to a federal investigation. Richard and Brenda lost everything: their country club membership, their luxury estate, their freedom. They were charged with multiple felonies, including fraud and obstruction of justice. The generational trust, once their personal piggy bank, was frozen and eventually liquidated to cover their legal fees and restitution. My parents had always believed that family responsibility meant preserving a flawless social facade and punishing anyone who deviated from their curated brand. But true family responsibility is rooted in fierce, unyielding protection. It is the conscious daily choice to put the well-being and psychological safety of a child above the comfort of your own ego. When you choose to parent a child, whether they share your DNA or they arrived on your doorstep carrying their belongings in a stay-tissued trash bag, you are making a sacred vow. You are promising to be the barrier between them and the chaos of the world. Fairness in raising children means holding everyone to the exact same standard of accountability, even the grandparents. It means demonstrating that toxic behavior is never excused simply because of a shared last name. If we want to raise a generation of resilient, empathetic adults, we must show them that love is not a transaction. It is not conditional on their ability to fulfill our unlived dreams or secure our social standing. Love must be an absolute, non-negotiable harbor. This brings us to the most critical component of long-term guidance, the inheritance of truth. Aunt Beatrice left behind a financial fortune. But the real wealth she imparted to me was a lesson I learned in her mahogany library when I was 12 years old. The math never lies. That philosophy extends far beyond auditing hospital spreadsheets or exposing embezzled trust funds. It is a fundamental parenting value. You teach a child the math of human behavior. You teach them that actions carry weight, that character is defined by choices, and that the truth is the ultimate equalizer. When Richard tried to bribe Leo with a cashier's check, he was relying on the old arithmetic of wealth and silence. By empowering Leo to hand that evidence to the judge, the math was corrected. We taught him that integrity cannot be purchased. We showed him that while the world can be profoundly unfair, he possesses the inherent capacity to balance the scales. This is how you build a real traditional family structure. You do not build it by forcing a child into a rigid mold. You build it by giving them the tools to dismantle the molds that try to trap them. The transition from the adrenaline of a courtroom to the quiet hum of a Tuesday evening is where the real work of parenting happens. The drama fades. The echoes of the gavel disappear, and you are left with the mundane, beautiful reality of raising human beings. It thrives on consistency. For children who have experienced profound instability, consistency is the ultimate proof of devotion. It is the promise that the person who made the macaroni and cheese on a rainy afternoon will still be standing in the kitchen the next morning. My parents failed to understand this fundamental truth. They viewed children as a captive audience for their greatness rather than individuals requiring steady, patient guidance. By rejecting Leo and Maya, they didn't just lose access to a trust fund. They lost the profound privilege of watching two remarkable minds unfold. They traded the messy, authentic joy of real connection for the cold, sterile approval of a country club dining room. If you have ever had to break a cycle of generational toxicity to protect the people you truly love, you understand that the hardest choices are often the quietest ones. We invite you to join our community of storytellers and survivors who know that the best revenge is a life well lived. Subscribe and follow the channel Aura Vengeance to explore more narratives about the calculated pursuit of justice and the beautiful, undeniable resilience of the human spirit. As I sit on my back porch tonight watching the fireflies blink against the heavy summer darkness, I think about the legacy we are all leaving behind. Maya's laughter drifts across the grass, untethered and free. Leo turns a page in his book, bathed in the amber glow of the porch light, safe in the knowledge that no one will ever ask him to pack his bags again. We defeated the monsters, turned on the lights, and secured the fortress. But occasionally, when the wind rattles the pine trees just right, I look out past the edge of the lawn into the deep woods. I wonder about the cramped apartments and the silent rooms where the people who chose their pride over their flesh and blood now sit. I wonder if they ever look out their own windows into the dark, realizing too late that they spent their entire lives building a kingdom only to lock themselves outside its gates. We all choose the ghosts that haunt us. I just happen to be at peace with mine.